Welcome to the Sales Mindset Podcast, where we talk about anything that is going to help you have the right mindset for success, particularly in sales. Ryan, what's our question today?
So today we're going to be talking about rejection. So we've kind of covered rejection quite a bit, mostly on the call reluctance, like fear side of it. But rather today I want to talk about, when it comes to rejection, using the positive aspects of rejection moving forward.
Okay. So it's particularly when we talk about the growth mindset, the growth mindset was something that was studied by Carol Dweck, and it's often talked in relation to grit. But another area where growth mindset can be talked about is deliberate practice. So when we talk about grit, we talk about growth mindset and deliberate practice. Grit is the idea that effort is squared when it comes to your results, and it creates this curve of what seems like from the outside sudden results. No one ever sees you struggling, right? However, the big piece of that, and this is the deliberate practice and growth mindset component of it, is that you have to actually look to grow from the failure, right? So rejection is a failure, right? And no one has ever gotten anywhere without risking that failure. And there's nothing wrong with risking that failure. There's a quote from Abraham Lincoln, and I'm probably going to butcher it since I don't have it in front of me, but essentially, my only concern is not that you've failed, but that you're content with your failure. And there's another one from Henry Ford, who said, failure is just an opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. So when we look at any rejection that you get, you need to see it not just as, okay, I've ticked off the box, I'm more likely to succeed next time, but, all right, I failed. What could I do better here? So the idea is whenever you get rejected, you have to look at what caused that particular rejection and what opportunities, if any, sometimes there's none, what opportunities do you have to learn from it? So if you're in a call center, chances are your calls are always recorded in some way, shape, or form, depending on the laws of your particular state. So go over those calls and see, okay, what did I do wrong here? If you're looking at ghosted rejection, and that is you're not explicitly rejected, but no one ever returned your emails, your voicemails, or whatever, look at the way you're crafting those particular messages. This is going to require you to have some sort of coach or have some sort of mentor who's listening to you, who can listen to the recordings, who can go over your messages and say, here's a reason why you might not be getting a reply to that. Today's training, for example, using more confident language in those LinkedIn reach outs that would not give the communication that they're unsure of themselves. That's an example of that, so that in this case, we're preventing the rejection because she hasn't started really doing those reach outs just yet. But the same thing, if I know I was working on some stuff in the other office, but if I were able to listen to some of your calls this morning, I might have been able to give you some feedback. I know you're speaking more in your own network, so it's probably less of a concern when you've got that going on. But if you're talking cold calls, that's definitely something that you want to listen. This is why working solo is less advantageous, or remote work even is less advantageous to working in a team setting where people can overhear you talking and give you feedback. And of course, that also requires you to be open to that particular feedback.
No matter how it feels, multiple minds are going to be better than one. And even if you don't have access to a proper mentor or a proper coach, which ideally you should, but in the event that you don't, at Canaz.com, you can find a great one. But even if you don't, just having somebody to bounce it off a wall with, people feel it's very much an emotional intelligence endeavor, making those first connections, especially when we're talking about the cold calls or even an extended conversation, or running those fake simulations with a friend or your partner, or even better, like a brief phone call. Pretend you're the secretary that's gatekeeping in your industry, and I'm going to try to break through it. I'm going to try to talk to you. And just running that with any person can give you a certain amount of feedback. Hearing it out loud in a no-stake situation, or them giving you feedback on what you're saying, is a huge thing.
So what we have with our salespeople are the after action reports.
Mm-hmm.
And the after action reports are exactly for that. They're to allow you to get down on paper the way something went, so that if a new person comes to you as the manager and says, okay, here's my after action reports.
Yeah.
Help me grow from these. And that's just getting your stuff down on paper immediately after that particular call. That's part of that deliberate practice. You don't need one of our after action reports. Make your own after action reports. All it is a basic reflection of, what was I expecting to happen? How did that actually go? What could I have done better? What did I do well? What do I think I did well? Was it the customer? Did they just hang up? Obviously, there's nothing you can do about that outside of looking at what the first few words you said out of your mouth were.
Mm-hmm. I think to almost take it in a slightly different direction, building off of that, it's very much reviewing what you've done and then trying to apply new knowledge. Mm-hmm. And that is a learning process. Mm-hmm. So making a mistake, it is a good thing, but you're almost certainly going to make it again.
Yes.
And going and saying, it's about the self-talk that you do to yourself, where you make a good decision, or you make a poor decision, or you mess up a sale, or you say something wrong on a call, and you do write it down immediately afterwards, and you try to work on it, you practice it, but then you still make the mistake again. Mm-hmm. What's very important is the self-talk in that process, because I think it's really easy. I know I do it so much. It's probably one of the biggest things that I do. It's a problem where I hold myself to a really high standard. When I make a mistake, go really hard on myself. And using the standard of treating yourself as your own employee and your own boss is an interesting thought experiment on it, I think.
It's a delicate balance, because yes, you can be too nasty with yourself, but sometimes
you can be too soft.
Yeah, you can. I heard something that said the lazy people look at the people who work and say that they're obsessed and overbearing, and the people who do all the work think that they are lazy, right? And they push themselves harder and harder. And of course, thinking about the podcast where we talked about positive mindset, that's where you gotta be careful with it. I think another element of it is to continue learning. Reading books about sales or about how you can approach sales better. There's tons on LinkedIn. There's tons on YouTube that and TikTok that give you advice on sales. Hell, the advertising that I get, just because we talk about sales so much, I get so much advertising that I actually learn from the advertising, and I obviously I don't buy it, otherwise I'd probably be spending a fortune on different types of sales techniques. But just the idea of what are you reading and what are you doing to grow as a salesperson, so that your ability to reflect on those situations can grow. I loved that when I got Challenger and Let's Get Real for a person today, they're like, oh, this is great. I'm going to be able to learn more. And I'm like, this girl has that is going to set her up for success.
Yeah, she has since she's been here, honestly. Yeah. Very, very ready to learn. There's so much knowledge out there, it's almost overwhelming. And trying to have the expectation that you're going to learn everything at one time is unrealistic. You should always be growing and putting in strong effort. It's effectively a full-time job, but it is a job that should always be focused on the side. Like we like to talk about with any industry, you always have a side job that's lead gen. Another side job is growth and paying attention to yourself. Yeah.
Not to bastardize Glenn Ross, but A, always B, growing, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and if you're new to sales, there's some common books and common methodologies that are great starts to help you grow. There's no one right methodology or framework or whatever. Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play, Challenger Sale, or the two that I just mentioned. But there's also the Miller Hyman Strategic Selling. There's Spin Selling. There's Trap Selling by Keenan. Was that?
It's a great book, Spin Selling.
Yeah. By Keenan. There's To Sell Is Human by Pink, which is more of a philosophy. There's Sandler Selling. A classic that will help you understand your ability to grow is the How to Win Friends and Influence People. Even if it's a little dated in its language, the principles are still pretty relevant today.
I remember one thing that you had said a while ago that actually stuck with me pretty good was the idea of, if you learn something new today, this sales call is not the time to use it. Do you have any comments on that?
It depends on... I don't know if that was me that said that. It may have been someone else. I don't want to take credit where it doesn't do it, but I can see the philosophy that would go behind that. That you want to think about how you're going to use a technique before you use that technique, or practice that technique before you use that particular technique.
Be very comfortable with it.
Yeah, but if you're thirsty, or you're in a situation where you really don't have time to do that, then some self-practice, just talking to a mirror probably will help you out with that. It's just basically to get your words right, because if you're reading or writing something, it sounds different in your mind than it would if you were speaking it out to another person. So you've got to actually read it. Yeah. So yesterday I was giving a speech at Toastmasters, and I tried practicing the speech while I was basically supervising something else, because I didn't need to be completely on, and I figured, okay, I'll just read it. I couldn't duplicate cadence. I couldn't duplicate my tempo or my volume or my tone the same way. And practicing it and timing it when I was mentally reading it versus even whispering it is better than nothing at all. So when you're practicing, if you're role playing against something, whether it's a wall, a mirror, artificial intelligence, whatever it happens to be, then you want to speak it. You want to see how it sounds coming out of your mouth. Something that sounds very natural coming out of my mouth might sound very strange coming out of yours, and vice versa. You won't hear me saying things like lit fire or that smacks or slaps. I'm sorry. You see my point. Very often, if ever, because I know it doesn't sound right coming out of someone who's 47 years old.
No, I think it works.
Yeah. That slaps then?
Yeah. That sure does slap.
All right. That's fire. Lit.
Got completely distracted when I was going to say. Oh, yeah. On that note, so I'm actually into stand-up, like really big into it. We were actually talking about it last time. It was very topical. But I watched a ton of stand-up. I've seen like probably half the collection on Netflix of the, stand-up section. And I actually been trying to do my own stand-up stuff. And at first I was trying to write stuff down. And then I would read it back, or I would struggle a lot writing it down, and I'd read it back, and I wouldn't really understand what I was going for. So what I've started doing is what you're saying. And it's a similar concept, because I've started doing it with sales now too, where I just open voice memos on my phone or voice notes on my phone, and I just pretend like I'm giving, like an off-the-cuff, stand-up comedy show where I just have an idea for a joke, and I just like run with it. And it's like a 15-minute recording for a 5-minute joke, because I'm just going through and saying, no, I don't like that, actually. Run it back, and then, do it so many different times in different tones, and I listen to it back, and it's the most painful thing in the world to listen to. But I've actually started doing it with sales a little bit, where I actually did it with Kanaz when we first started sitting down and doing this, like how I felt the initial intro to a phone call would go. Just like recording it a few different times and listening to it back and just seeing how I liked it, how the tone went.
It's a good way of testing your voicemails out too.
Yeah.
The one thing about that, though, that can be really interesting, especially for someone who's not done that before, is the awkward listening to yourself on a recording.
Yeah, you're not how you think you sound.
No. I'm used to me and how I sound because of editing all these podcasts and educational videos and everything else at this particular point in time. But it's really rough for someone initially.
No, I know. I have this thing where my voice, I don't know if this is how it usually is, but my voice is higher pitched to me than what it is on a recording, or at least it's how I perceive it. I thought it was supposed to be reversed, but I
think so, because it's going through the water basically in your head and whatnot.
Maybe it's just the way that I interpret it, or just that I'm so comfortable with it. But when I listen to myself on recording, it sounds deeper, but also more childish to me. When I hear it, I'm like, oh no, I don't like that. It drives me crazy.
But back to the main topic here of listening to yourself, going with the intention of growing, right? That's not making mistakes for the sake of making the mistakes.
Yeah.
And when you're thinking about this, and I think this is another caveat I want to throw out there, you may hear yourself make a mistake in real time.
Yeah.
And that can really throw you off.
Yeah.
So you want to, this is something I've learned in public speaking, realize that you may have heard it, but the other person probably did not.
Yeah.
you'll want to correct it later, but don't let that get to you. And sometimes it's just, excuse me, I misspoke, blah, blah, blah.
It's as simple as that, too.
Yeah.
It's all, honestly, it's thinking about, like, hearing it out loud and understanding what somebody else would say and how you would not judge them at all. If they made a simple pronunciation mistake, it's not like you're gonna go in on them for it. Or if somebody trips over, they'll say, oh, excuse me, and then keep talking. It's the most natural, calm, human thing in the world to make a small mistake and keep going with it. When it becomes a problem is if you dwell on it and then have it poison the rest of the conversation.
Yeah. As we're talking about this, one of the things I'm struck by is the idea of making the intention to learn. And one of the things I think many people have trouble with is laughing at themselves. So there's another thing that I think is important for a growth mindset is to be able to laugh at the mistakes that you have made.
Yeah. I definitely have a problem with that sometimes, where it's definitely, I think as I've gotten older, I think it's just like a general thing as you get older, it doesn't matter as much anymore. But I do still find myself like subtly defending myself when I make a mistake, or that's totally reasonable, or somebody will, with friends, somebody says something stupid and you make fun of them because it's just fun to do. And I'll find myself, instead of laughing along, I'll be maybe a little insecure and I'll like subtly defend myself. And looking back, I'm like, nobody cares what's going on right now.
We're all a little insecure.
Yeah.
I think even the most confident looking person has a little bit of insecurity in them and nerves. But one of the things I think that sets them apart from people that are confident, and they are, is that they can be like, oh, that's kind of silly that I feel that way.
Yeah.
And again, it's always thinking about how you perceive other people. And how often do you really judge people by their mistakes? You think about the mistake you made with another person far longer than that other person will ever think about it. You're giving so much rent, if you will, rent-free space to things that don't deserve rent-free space in your head when it comes to those particular errors and those particular mistakes. Unless they're egregious, like, I don't know, teaching with your zipper down.
Yeah, that happened to you.
That's happened.
Yeah. I was having an issue with the zipper for a little bit. I don't know what happened. It's like a mental thing.
Yeah, it's not a forget thing. It's just, I'm cutting that out. Maybe not. But either way, it's this, don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah. I think that how you view yourself very much comes through in how effective you are. It's definitely something I've been more and more aware of. Not necessarily with myself, but just like I've been paying a lot more attention ever since, honestly, we've been doing this podcast. We've been talking about stuff like this more, and I've been talking with friends about it, where it's becoming very clear to me where days that maybe I'm a little bit more tired and not really feeling 100% are also the days that it colors my view on other people as well, or colors the view on how good I think I'm doing at something. Where if I don't feel 100%, I also feel externally it's 100% apparent, if that makes sense.
I see. So you're saying that when you don't feel 100%, you feel that everyone else can see 100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even though it's most likely not true. Maybe sometimes if you're, some days you're in a particularly foul mood or things aren't going your way, maybe that'll be clear, but nobody's really paying that much attention to you.
No,
generally.
And it's a very egotistical way of
that,
oh my God, they saw that I mispronounced one single word in a 3-hour speech.
Yeah.
That would be a boring speech.
Yeah.
Or really, really engaging.
It better be good.
I think so.
Maybe
3 hours. Yeah. I meant 30 minutes.
But
3 was a factor there.
Yeah.
So what's our takeaway here? What do you think?
I'm not sure. This podcast was lit though.
Yeah. Growth mindset. If you have it, if you practice deliberately, if you look at going into any failure, any rejection with the opportunity to really learn from it, that's where success will really come from. Whether you're in sales or not, any type of failure, you're going to have to scrape your knees from time to time when you're learning to ride a bike.
That's why I did that, the lit thing.
Okay. Fire.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.